Welcome to This Week in the PNFL. I am your host, Mark Hill, and along for the ride are my two co-hosts, Mitch Brawl and Dean Chambers. How you doing, gentlemen?
Very good.
Fantastic. How about you, Mark? How are you doing?
I'm having a wonderful day. Wonderful day. And for this show, we have our guest host, James Bloomer. How you doing, James?
Great.
Awesome. We got everything working. Some minor technicalities. This is what happens when, the interns got a little upset because I spent money on graphics for the final Super Bowl game, and they didn't get their extra bowl of swill, to feed them and themselves. So
I blame Bernie Sanders, Mark. They've been listening to Bernie Sanders, and now they're unionizing on you.
Yeah, they're unionizing. So, I got to let the commission know he needs to throw a couple more pennies our way so I can take care of the interns. So,
is to cut the budget.
Yeah, definitely. I guess that little confetti that I had was just a little bit too much for them. So, but as we are we're in between seasons right now, so we've had a lot of things going on, and with the guys and I, we're going to discuss on this show are some of the things regarding the draft pool, the players coming up for the draft, and we're just going to kind of kick it out and have some open items, open ends, topics, whatever the guys want to discuss, and we'll break that down. As you guys in the league already know, we had to finish up the points. Hopefully everyone has their points set up, and then after that, they're going to push the button and to start the new season. And once the button's been pushed, and then we go ahead and do the draft. We have the free agency. So we're just going to kick this idea around. I think let's start this out with our guests. We'll start out with James. Just to open it up with you, James, during the off season, as we're at right now, as I kind of lean into this, where would you be at right now as far as what were you doing looking at the draft pool and the other things going on during the off season? And then once you give your answer, I'd like to have Mitch and Dean jump in as well. So go ahead, gentlemen.
What I would be doing is I'd be looking at what people I'm going to keep and what people I'm going to get rid of. The key is to have a plan kind of going. After that, then I start looking at the free agent pool to see if I can fill anything in the free agent pool. I generally don't look for the best player in the free agent pool. I'll look for like the third or fourth best because they can usually get them pretty cheap. After that, I'll start breaking down the draft. When I break down the draft, I break down each position in sections because you got to watch, because if there's only two good quarterbacks, they're probably going to be gone quick. Other than that, that's pretty much what I'm doing. I'm kind of breaking it all, going through the draft and dividing the players up into different groups.
Okay, go ahead and jump in there, Mitch and Dean. Go ahead and answer that.
Yeah, James was talking about, as far as draft goes, I've taken the draft pool that has been sent out to us, and I know that many of you all have messaged me back from the spreadsheet I sent out to everybody with the rosters on it. And so I'm taking that and I'm dissecting it out. So similar to what James talking about, looking at different each position, but giving a priority weighting, if you will, to certain positions. And that's actually something that I worked on a little bit last year in conversations with James, Rich, and a few others. Because I can be honest, the off season, this time of the season, used to be my least favorite. I love the game planning and the preparation and all that piece of it. And then the GM part is just kind of like, all right, let's just hurry up and get through this. Well, I'll say the last few seasons, I've begun to get into the GM side and the draft and the free agency piece of it. And some of that has been in some conversations with some of the other coaches and getting some ideas. So definitely you don't want to look at each position category as equal. And as you try to rate, who the best player or best players are overall in the draft, it really does come down to kind of weighting out the key positions and then seeing who those top players are in those top positions as you're making out your draft board. So that's what I'm doing right now. And having some fun doing it.
Okay.
Yeah, what I would say about that is I'm looking at this situation regarding my own team. I currently have 52 players on roster, and I have some needs that I need to fill. And, of course, the question is kind of like what James said, is to look at which of those needs am I going to fill in the draft, which am I going to fill possibly in free agency. And another consideration that I have to look into here so I don't 2 weeks from now get to the situation where I have 58 players on roster and I have to have 5 of them in practice squad, is to look at how many of the players I currently have or would draft would be eligible that I would put in practice squad. But I have some younger players that I definitely would not put on practice squad that are even slated for being either in starting roles or contributing roles that I definitely would, that I'll have on the active roster. So part of what I have to look at, and this is what's caused some of the trades I've made, to trade some players away for either points or draft picks to get to a situation where I can, can have enough practice squad eligible players to put on that, because part of the reason for practice squad, put some younger players in there that you're developing, because you look at how many yellow and green players you have on those lists that are going to be aging over the next few seasons and possibly retiring. So some of that is, those are future players that you may replace with some of the rookies that you draft this year and next year. So that's all of what I'm considering. And in doing that, then I come up with my own plan. Which needs am I going to fill in the draft? Which ones do I fill with free agents?
Okay, so when you go through this process, after the button's been pushed, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the roster and figure out how you want to fill those slots in. But then you're looking at picking up the free agents beforehand. Now,
and I believe Rich has pressed the button. We are in new season.
Okay, so now the button has been pressed. When you've gone through you've gone through the physicals, you have players that have failed in their physical. All right, so you got one more season with them, or you have some gaps out there. You touched on it a little bit, just kind of expand on it a little bit more for all three of you. What are you looking for when you're trying to find that person to fill the free agency? And when you're placing those bids on those players, what is the formula or the strategy or a general idea, not your specific plan, but just a general overview of looking at how many points you want to put down for the player and how that whole process works? I'm sure for the newer coaches, they don't know about it, and the ones that's been in for a few years, they may still kind of be a little bit gray on it. So can you guys touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that a little bit, and I think James really hit on the head on something that, quite honestly, I think it took me a few seasons to really get my head around. And, as we talked about in some of the forums, right now, as a whole, there is not a lot of differentiation in our player ratings from player to player. All right. I know that is changing and we're expanding that out, but as a whole still there's small differentiation. So I think James hit it best, and I think for new coaches this is something to pay attention to. You might have a quarterback, and I'm thinking like Mason Rudolph a few years ago, where there was a bit of a quarterback bidding war on him, and I think the top bidder ended up spending 5 or 6 points on Mason Rudolph, and you could probably get someone that might be a point below in a category or two, but you probably get them for 1 point. And unless they were going to be your starter, having a backup for 1 point versus having to pay 5 or 6 points, I think is key. And so don't necessarily chase after the person everyone else is chasing, because there's a very good chance you can get someone that's probably 98% of the rating scale of that person for far less points. And I think James has done a great job of that, and you can see the points he's accumulated over the years. The other thing, too, I would say that pay attention to is, everyone might have their own system of coming up with how they evaluate the talent of a player. Take a look at the draft pool and determine, all right, which positions in the draft pool seem to be deep. Ones where, okay, there's, if there might be 6 or 7 players at this one position that I would rate as, first round or second round talent. Well, if there's only, one person in the free agent pool in that position that you felt like is worth getting, then don't worry about it. Wait and draft that position in the draft. Don't just go get a free agent at that position just because it's there and you have an opening. Make sure you're weighing out what's available in the draft. It's not. The reverse is also true. If there isn't anybody in the draft that's a top, first, second, or third round talent, and you have a true need to fill, and there's only one free agent that you feel really good about, then you might need to, overpay a little bit for that free agent if it's a critical position. I wouldn't do that for a fullback or punter or something like that. But those are a few of my thoughts. So I'll turn it back over to y'all.
Yeah, I did something like that 2 off seasons ago. It was like in the 4th or 5th, maybe 6th round of the draft, and I was looking to get a young linebacker. And some of the linebackers I was looking at all got drafted ahead of me. So I ended up spending the draft pick on something else, and then I signed a linebacker for free agency. And, again, that was a position that was kind of, depth and a role player. So a lot of the players that I look to pick up in free agency will be either for depth or certain kinds of roles. So a lot of times if I'm looking to fill a position in the draft and the players that I think meet my criteria get drafted before I have a pick to draft them, I may then go back to the free agent pool and pick someone up.
Well, on that note, I rode Jalen Hurts to the NFC Championship. I signed him after the draft. So you can find value at any point in that free agency pool right now. And remember, when you're signing free agents, you're signing backups for the most part. You're not getting starters, so it doesn't require that many points. People aren't, unless a coach makes a huge mistake, there aren't going to be starters in that free agency pool.
Okay, so basically it's to fill in some of the gaps that you have, and in the meantime, when you're looking at the actual draft, you can target the players that you want in your draft to be able to fill your needs, basically. Okay.
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
For the most part. All right,
yeah.
So now the next question that I think may come up with some of the coaches is, you have your players, your free agents, and your draft picks. Now the question becomes, how long do you sign them for? You look on your spreadsheet, and it'll show the columns in there. If you take a look, you have every year, in this case, is going to be the 2042 season, 43, 44, 45, 46. Those are the upcoming seasons that you have. And then you look on the columns, you may see some areas where there's open space there, which means you got to sign a player. You have items that are in red. You have items that are in blue. Let's talk a little bit about what each one of those columns are, what each one of those symbols mean for the new coaches. Mm-hmm. And when you go to sign for a player, how many years, what's a good idea to sign for? Should it be 1, 2, or 3? Should it be even more? So I want to throw this out to everyone. Each one of you guys take a shot. Where do you start with that?
Yeah, well, you look at the contract file, like I said, there's 5 years of seasons on there, and I guess it's more I'm looking at it for when I'm restructuring contracts or extending players. And the first thing I look at is when that contract is due, where's that player rank as far as their ratings against others in the league? Because, if they're a top 20, if they're a wide receiver, they're in the top 25 of the league, or top 10, well, you know what? I'm probably going to try to extend them for a longer period, especially if they're only 4, 5, 6 years experience. If they're a player that is on the lower end, or if they're in a position, say, my third string fullback or something, I'm just going to cut them and let them walk, because I can go and, sign somebody for 1 point and get him for a 3-year contract versus having to spend, 4 points or 6 points to get the same amount of years on it. So the where they land and their overall talent and how old they are. When I think about how long to extend them, now with our new anti-aging rules kicking in, others probably have much different opinions, but, so for a quarterback, I might extend them if it's somebody I'm feeling really good about. Like right now I have a quarterback that ratings-wise looks pretty good compared to others in the league. I'm going to extend him out this year to where he's going to be 1 year into his physical stage of his career. Because at that point, it probably is going to be more of a year-to-year, contract piece. So I'll probably sign him to a 4-year contract. He's 8 years right now experience. And so when his contract comes due, I'll know whether he has passed his first physical or not before I have him under contract again. So that's another thing I'm looking at too.
Yeah, when I'm doing the contract restructuring, I look at the list of players that need a contract, and in the past there's been 3 tags, and now we're going to have 4 because there's going to be an additional restricted free agency tag. Generally, players that have passed their physical and play 2 more years, I'd look at giving them 2-year contracts if they're worth re-signing, if they're important enough players, if they're starters or very good at their position. And if they're not worthy of a 2-year contract and they're not worthy of a tag, then I let them go to free agency and I might sign them back for 1 point. What I don't do that some team owners have gotten in the habit of doing, because it costs 4 points to sign a 2-year contract, and it's 2.5 points for a 1-year contract. So I notice a lot of players, because they look at the large group of players they have to re-sign, they want to re-sign them all. They post restructurings where they sign a bunch of players to 1-year contracts at 2.5 points each. Now, that gets very expensive, and then it feeds into the problem because the next off season, all of those players plus others have to be re-signed again. So you're constantly. So I found that it's much better for the players who are worth re-signing. I do 2-year contracts. So the ones I signed 2 years this year still have a year left 1 season from now, and then that turns out to be, I think, a better way of spending the points than spending the points on a lot of 2.5 point 1-year contracts.
I agree completely with that. And you'll hear me say this a lot, but having a plan and keeping the amount of points you have into that plan is a really big key. Because if you don't have a lot of points, you might have to start making some hard decisions, like it might be worth it to let talent go or trade talent away to sign only a few players to 2-year contracts instead of signing a bunch of players to 1-year contracts. Notice when your contracts come up and make plans according to that. Because if you just keep going year to year or looking year to year, you're going to catch yourself into what a lot of coaches have found themselves, like what Dean was saying. You're signing 2.5 point contracts and basically giving away points just to keep this team together, and you'll be getting farther and farther away from winning. You got to have a plan going in because everything's a limited resource, and if you don't value those resources and you don't use them properly, you're going to find that you don't have them.
Now, one thing also mentioning about points, and I know that during the season there were some people making some comments or questions about it. One thing that Richard was doing throughout the season was when we talk about the games and the odds, he would bet on those games. And if I'm not mistaken, gentlemen, if you place those bets and you win those bets, you get additional points added to your allocation, correct?
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
So for you guys that are out there that say you didn't place any bets or you're kind of sporadic, that's another way throughout the season because you have a set amount of points that you start out with at the season before the season goes, but you can have more points that you can use, so you have something that you can kind of bank up, but you got to be able to use those points as well. So
actually, Mark, I highly encourage folks not to bet, because the fewer folks that bet, the better chance I have to finishing in the top 3 to earn a point. So,
no,
I encourage folks not to bet.
No, you don't want that.
You don't want that.
No, because if you look at the top people getting points, I think it's Jerry, Thomas, and Justin. So do you really want those 3 amassing points, or do we want more people betting so that they don't get as many points?
I prefer them to have less points. So I want to jump in there and try and get as many points as I can, because I'm going to need them during the off season.
And the one thing I will say about points, look at them as an asset. Don't look at them as a cap, because you can carry them over year to year. So I see a lot of coaches, like, they'll go burn through all their points when you could possibly see, like, if you know that you have a bunch of free agents coming up in a year, that means save some points to sign those guys.
Yes, and they become more of an asset when you can trade them away or you can trade for them. When they became a commodity that you can trade along with draft picks and players, they became even more of an asset.
Okay, so basically, it's by having it's kind of like keeping you under the cap, so you have those available for you, so you can go ahead and expand them and use them more, and you can sign players for longer terms.
Yeah, it's kind of like old cell phone carryover minutes. Yeah.
Okay. So
and when you get to like the 10-year extensions or the really long extensions, you actually get you're getting really good bang for your buck. So if you can sign the good players, like Mitch was saying, like the players that you know you're going to keep, that are going to be starters for their whole career, you can sign them long term but you need to make sure you don't trade them. Also, that's another thing to think about. A lot of people don't look at contract lengths when they're talking trades. If you're signing for a guy that's only got 1 year, you're kind of signing for a thing that you're going to have to sign. So you're already planning to spend those points. You didn't trade those points, but you traded a guy, so you're already planning to spend 4 points next year to re-sign him. So those are all things you need to look at when you're making trades.
Okay. So I think we covered that one enough. Now, as far as I guess I think we also talked a little bit. I guess we can kind of back this up a little bit. The guys that have gone through the physicals, we've talked about that. We've already gone through that. For those that don't know, I guess I should have brought this up early on. What are, just one last time, the colors as far as with the physical? So you have a guy that is, I know on the chart, if you look at it, it tells you for each particular position how many years they're at, and when they get to a certain point in age, that's when they're up for their physical. So we know the red means they failed, but there's 2 colors in the green. What are those, for those that are just learning, what are the differences between those colors, between the light green and the dark green?
As I understand, the light green are the ones that pretty much automatically pass. The dark green are the ones that could fail or could pass. Of course, the red are the ones that are already failed. They're playing their last season. When I look at red players, I'm either going to keep them for the last season they play or try to trade them away. And some teams will trade for 1 or 2 of those players to play their last season. And you should, at that point, as part of your plan, already have someone on the roster who's going to replace them when they're playing their last season. And then certainly the dark green players, those are the positions that you should be looking at drafting some rookies to ultimately replace them.
You're kind of right. The dark green means they've passed the physical, I believe, and the yellow means that they need to have a physical. You notice it doesn't change to yellow until the beginning of the next season. So if you look at it, yellow will go green if they pass, or go red if they failed. One thing to note on that, if you're making trades and stuff like that this season for older players, if they are on your roster at the beginning of the season, you can transfer their role. If they are on after the first game, I think it is, or maybe the week before, you'll have to ask Rich on that one. it's in that range. If they're signed or traded to you after that point, you can no longer transfer that role. So if you trade for, say, a quarterback that's got 13 years on him after week 1, and you're planning on transferring the role, you will not be able to. You'll just be able to run that physical on him, and that's it. You can transfer roles to him, I believe, but you cannot transfer his role.
Okay. And also, as you guys know, that since we've already gone through that process, if you want to transfer the role from one player to another, then you basically just post on the forum that you're transferring the role from, for my example, say that I want to transfer a role from, let me see if I can pull it up here. Say from Devontae Allen to Myles Garrett. So I would transfer that, you post it, and then that person, instead of Myles Garrett getting one roll of the die, he gets 2 rolls of the die. So it's a better chance that he won't decline. He can be around for another season. So I think that pretty much covers that. Would you agree, guys?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So now that we have those covered, any other topics that you guys think that you can think of that we would have to, that we need to get out to the league as far as going into the next season? It's just pretty much an open forum here right now. We still have some time left. Open forum for the new coaches that are out there, especially for the new coaches, because we do have a couple new coaches out there. So what are some of the advice that you would want to give to them? And we'll just, take a turn, each one of you.
I guess I can start. I want to discuss, Jerry posted a thing about hating your team and the trades some of the trades being made. I did talk to him about it. It was more of a general statement. It wasn't actually at anybody. But what I'm going to tell all new coaches is wait. Everything you've learned in past leagues and watching the NFL means nothing in this league. Position values, what is important, are completely different. The thing is wait a year, figure out what's going on first before you make decisions. Also, have a plan. Look at your roster, make a plan, have goals, have things you're going to acquire every year. And then you look at, when you're talking trades and things of free agency and stuff like that, then you start comparing value if it fits in your plan. And after I emailed Rich today, and he basically said, if you have doubts or if you have any questions, please email him before you submit that trade, so he can tell you, yeah, you might want to rethink that, or no, that's a good trade, because he's there to help, and he's been in this league. He is probably one of the best GMs in this league and one of the best coaches I've seen in this game. So use him as a resource. Heck, even use me or Jerry or Charlie. All of us have been in this league for ages, and we've all seen trades. And I will say one thing. The best trades I've made are the ones I didn't make, because I walked away from them before they got too ridiculous that I would have lost them.
Okay. Dean.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I won't name the team or the owner, but there was one particular person who asked me advice. I'm thinking about making this trade. What do you think? And I basically advised the person that, although the player looked like a good player, I said, there are certain players you can get at certain rounds in the draft as well as free agents that would rival that. And I thought the price that the other team was asking was too high. But it turned out that person didn't make that trade, and someone else ended up making the trade instead, I believe, for a much lower price. So I think sometimes when an offer is made, I think sometimes team owners think, oh, that looks like a good deal, I'll do that. This is a newer owner. I mean, the team owners that are probably almost as experienced as I am as far as how many seasons have been in the league, or maybe more so, certainly aren't necessarily asking me for advice, nor am I necessarily giving it. Speaking of the forum, we did see a situation where I did make some commentary about one particular trade, and, quite honestly, I just thought, you can debate whether or not I should have spoken up about it, but I just thought that in that instance, I was surprised that team owner, being a veteran team owner, paid as much for a particular player as he did, because I thought, as I said in the forum, that he had, quote, that I said that he, quote, paid the king's ransom for that player. I thought he had massively overpaid. And that's something we expect newer team owners to do, to overpay for a player. But I think some of us as veteran team owners can do that sometimes. We get caught up in the idea we really want this player. We really think that player would fit in with our team, so we're willing to, like, pay too much for them. And I think we should be kind of mindful of that when we're making trades.
Okay. Mitch.
Yeah, I was sitting there thinking through this a little bit, thinking back when I got back in the league and got was serious in the league, and I think something that James said is very true. Sometimes the best trades are the ones you don't make, and sometimes I'll see on the boards and I'll go, I think some folks just like trading just for the sake of trading, or they just like the thrill of starting new or just making a trade. And, hey, if that's what some people I know, like in fantasy football, people love to have the draft and then trade everybody, right? And so that's your thing. Whatever. Hey, have fun, right? But I think what James said is true about, have a game plan. Doesn't mean you got to have it built out for the next 10 seasons, but have a thought of, the type of roster you want. Make trades that make sense. Say no when it makes sense. Say no, and just know that. I think James, you said this earlier tonight too. You're not going to build your team through free agency. You're going to build it through the draft. You're going to build it through signing your players long term. You're going to fill some holes and some gaps with some free agency, but you're not going to build the core of your team around free agency and live to tell about it very long, or at least you're not going to have a lot of success. So those are my 10 cents, Mark.
The one thing I would add to that is if you're a new owner, you're not going to build it through trades either. We are way too savvy of owners out in this league that you're not going to get the better of most of them. So don't think you're going to build it through trades. In fact, you're most likely going to lose most of the trades you make.
Okay. So good ideas there. So, and definitely you guys I think what was it we talked pre-show, be wary of the sharks out there, because there are some sharks out there ready to, they're going to be circling around your boat just waiting to strike. All right, so as we are coming up to wrap up this show, I just want to thank you guys for coming on and try to help the younger coaches out. And most definitely, if you guys have any questions, reach out to either Charlie or Rich or just any of the coaches out there, because this is a time where it's different than just sitting there making the plays and designing plays. We're going to cover that into another show, going into that a little bit further. But for this time period, it's all about trying to get your player personnel lined up, and I think this is a good topic for you guys. Definitely play through it again so you can pick it up. And, again, if you have any questions, reach out to the coaches or to the commish. So as we go down the line for the end of the show, any final words from you over there, James?
Nope.
Okay. Any final words over there for you, Dean?
Just two teams that need to do their physicals. The sooner they get those done, then sooner Rich can run that, and we can move on to the next step in our off-season progression.
All right, Mitch, anything you got there for you, take it home.
I think what Dean is saying is let's get it.